Warsaw, Poland. Clearly concerned. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy personally went to see NATO defense ministers in Brussels. This week, he was worried that the war between Israel Hamas would distract from Ukraine's long and bloody struggle against Russia, that weapons would be needed. American and NATO officials moved to reassure Zelenskyy and promised another $2 billion in emergency military aid. But even before war in the Middle East began last week, there was a strong feeling in Europe, watching Washington, that world had reached peak Ukraine. Support for Ukraine's fight against Russian occupation would never be as high again. Former President Donald Trump's new candidacy for the White House shakes confidence that Washington will continue its broad support for Ukraine. But Europeans say concern is bigger than Trump and extends to much of the Republican Party, which has made halt in support for Ukraine a litmus test for conservatives' credibility. For the morning from the New York Times, even in Europe, Ukraine is becoming an increasingly divisive issue. Voters in Slovakia gave victory to former Prime Minister Robert Fico, who is sympathetic to Russia. The fierce election campaign in Poland, one of Ukraine's staunchest allies, has underlined tensions with Ukraine. Far-right opposition aiding Ukraine's war effort has grown in Germany, where Chancellor Olaf Scholz is trying to persuade voters' call for a stronger military. "I am pessimistic," said Ukrainian Parliament member Yelyzaveta Yasko, who sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee. "There are many questions now. Weapons production, security infrastructure, economic aid, the future of NATO," he said, but noted that the answers to these questions have a timeline of at least 5 years. "We have been fighting for 600 days," he added, "and I don't see the leadership and planning needed to take real action. Not just statements in support of Ukraine. Even more demoralizing is domestic politics' instrumentalization of Ukraine," Yasko said at a recent security forum in Warsaw, Poland. Opinion polls show that the public still supports Ukraine, but politicians are starting to use Ukraine as an issue to fight with each other. And Ukraine is the victim. "I am worried," she continued. "I don't like my country being used as a tool." Previous bipartisan support for Ukraine in the United States no longer seems valid. "There is already less backlash against anti-Ukrainian things," said Toomas Hendrik Ilves, former president of Estonia, citing the Republican right wing and influential voices such as Elon Musk. "Dangerous. If Washington cuts aid to Ukraine, deciding it is not worth cost." Senior European officials, including Josep Borrell, the European Union's head of foreign affairs and security policy, openly acknowledge that Europe will not be able to fill gap. He was in Ukraine's capital, Kiev, when Congress excluded Ukraine's support in the interim budget agreement. This was definitely not XP.